Is your water safe to drink? Well, who better to ask than the folks at TapScore and their CEO, Johnny Pujol. TapScore is essentially the Google of water analysis, and they're working with the EPA and local water utilities to build a new and improved water quality database. They're also the only company that has a certified network of water testing laboratories around the nation. And in our interview, Johnny leans on all of this data that they have to answer questions like, is your tap water safe to drink? What different contaminants can be found in it? And at what level are those contaminants acceptable to consume? We'll also take a look at a study they just completed testing 100 different kinds of bottled water to hear the results if bottled water is better than tap water. And then we'll end with how to find the best water treatment or water filtration solution if you need one for your home to make your tap water healthy and safe. Stick around because it's all coming up. Welcome to the Freshness Info series. I am Eric Ritland, and today we are joined by Johnny Pujol, the CEO and co-founder of TapScore. Welcome aboard, Johnny.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Eric.
Well, I've been very excited for our discussion today because the topic of contaminants in our tap water and our drinking water is something that's really top of mind for a lot of people, especially in the wake of the Flint water crisis. And I think that's really opened up people's eyes to wondering what their tap water quality is across the entire country. So before we dive into that broader discussion, maybe we can start with your background and hearing a little bit about your experience in the water industry.
Yeah, my background is largely in environmental engineering with a kind of emphasis on water chemistry and electrochemistry. I did my graduate work at UC Berkeley, worked for about a year in the kind of conventional industry at a consulting engineering firm. And at about that time, some of the research I'd been doing while in grad school began to win some attention and some grants, which pulled me out of the kind of regular consulting industry and into the idea of starting a business. And at that time, it was quite a bit different, actually, than what it turned out to be, namely water testing and environmental testing. But that's how the journey began. And now for about 6 years now, I've been the CEO and, as you said, co-founder of Simple Lab. And Simple Lab, owns this brand TapScore, which I think will be fun to talk about today.
So at Freshness, we have used the TapScore test quite a bit. And what we like about it is you can use TapScore for well water, city water, municipal water, and we're working on another one right now for lake water. So it doesn't matter what source your water is coming from, you're kind of an equal opportunity tester. And so maybe you could just talk a little bit about Simple Lab's mission and dive a little bit deeper into that.
We early on got really interested and excited by this big gap between what is known about water quality, water health, filtration technology, science, lab testing, like all of that world, and what people at home aren't aware of yet. So you have tons of research into analytical chemistry, analytical instrumentation, water sciences, toxicology, epidemiology, tons of really great scientific research, billions and billions of dollars spent learning and developing knowledge in universities and in research centers. And yet people at home are often very confused about kind of basic questions about their water quality, about their environmental health at large, really. And we thought, well, what is a step we can take to make your tap water feel safer when it is safe? And a step we can take to help you pick the right filter if you need one. And as you point out, the answers to those questions depend a lot on who's your water provider, if you're a drinking water utility customer. Is your water coming from a private well, either on your property or somewhere nearby? Or is it coming from surface water supply somewhere? Understanding what to test for in those circumstances so you can prove to yourself and your family and anyone who asks that your water quality is safe to drink, or hey, you know, I really need to invest in a filter for the home or for the countertop, and this is the one I need. And not until we're able to tell people with confidence how to get there, how to get to that place of like trust and confidence and understanding, like, are we ever going to really be able to separate ourselves from this fear of, you know, God, is this Flint, Michigan thing going to happen to me? Or should I be worried about PFAS or microplastic? Or should I buy bottled water? There's so much confusion there. And it was this gap, it was that confusion that was really the motivator and still today, the kind of consistent draw to TapScore. Sell consumers a product that helps them understand their tap water and make smart decisions and go on living happier, healthier lives at home, not thinking about their tap water anymore.
I love it. So you mentioned tap water a few times in that discussion, and I just want to pose this question to you because we get this every day. Is our tap water safe to drink?
Most of the time in the United States, the answer is yes. Depending on where you consider safe and unsafe, the answer changes a little bit. Personally, you know, living in Berkeley, California, I served by East Bay Municipal Utility District. I know my drinking water is safe. It's safe enough for me. Now, I know that because I've tested the water. I've seen the results. I've seen the heavy metal concentrations and the trihalomethane concentrations and the pH levels and the risk factors in my area. I've kind of looked at it all and compared that, you know, on a TapScore report to the risk levels. And I said, you know, that's acceptable. You know, 1 in a million chance of getting sick from my water, great. I'm happy with that. I'm going to move on to other things in my life that are, you know, potentially a bigger risk. Now, there are tens of thousands of communities across the country where the water quality is less reliable. There are big cities where the water quality is less reliable. It really depends on your home. It depends on the budget your utility has. It depends on the source of water that utility is using to get its water from. There's all these factors. And so, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to like, have you tested your tap water or your well water and seen what impacts that water quality from your plumbing, from the source itself, your taste concerns, the health risk. Like, you really at a certain point in time need to make that judgment for yourself once and for all. And the easiest way to do that is to just send the water into a certified lab, get a compelling report back that tells you what your arsenic levels are, your lead levels are, your uranium, heavy metals. Really look at all those results and decide for yourself. You know, don't spend your whole life being afraid of it. Don't spend your whole life buying bottled water unnecessarily or the wrong filter and wasting your money. You know, nip this problem in the bud, have confidence in your tap water, wake up in the middle of the night and drink it without fear, and move on.
Amen. And there's one thing that gets brought up when we show the test results of TapScore and the benchmarking that TapScore uses. So there's the EPA levels that a lot of people look at that are kind of the law of the land, that are enforceable or unenforceable in some cases. And then there's the TapScore benchmark. Could you explain the difference between how EPA benchmarks their acceptable contaminant level and how TapScore does it? So if you do get a test or you don't get a test and you look at the EPA level, how should people be thinking about that? What's safe versus what is acceptable or not?
Good question. And there's so much like confusing information about this out there. Like, there's this thing called the MCL, and then there's something called the EPA's MCLG. These are federal concentrations, by and large, for contaminants in drinking water across the United States. And they're federal because it's the federal EPA saying, hey, the MCLG is the goal for this contaminant. The goal is to have no arsenic in your water. So they'll say MCLG for arsenic is 0. And
that MCLG is the maximum contaminant level, right? Goal.
That's right. The goal. So when the EPA is about, I think it's like 100 or 110, and I should know the number, but 100 or 110 contaminants they've set this for. The obvious ones are like lead, arsenic, uranium, coliform bacteria. There's a bunch of these MCLs out there that the government has said, hey, these are important things to measure in water quality for our citizens to be healthy drinking the tap water. So we're going to regulate them, and we're going to give each of them an MCLG, a goal, and an MCL. And the first thing people usually ask is, what the heck is the difference? Why are there two concentrations there? Well, the MCLG is ideal. It would be wonderful to never have any lead in anyone's tap water. But this country has been around for hundreds of years already, and the plumbing has too, especially in certain parts of the country. And it's impractical to say, hey, overnight, we need to have no lead in our water. Well, someone's got to go out there and dig up a lot of old pipes. That means stopping traffic, dealing with local laws, spending a ton of money, right? So how do you get to an MCLG of 0 for lead? Okay, it's going to take some time. So pragmatically, they decided there's this other regulatory threshold. Now, this one's an actual regulatory threshold. The MCLG is just an ideal. It's a goal. MCL is a regulatory threshold, and it is what you have to hit today. It is a current compliance requirement to hit the MCL. And these are a little bit more lenient. These allow the utility to essentially have a little bit of lead in the water, a little bit of arsenic in the water. And same for most contaminants. Most of the MCLs are not 0. They're slightly above the ideal. And that's because, practically speaking, water is a universal solvent. It is dissolving everything it touches. You can't tell the utility, especially with the various budgets across the country, right? Some of these utilities are small and don't have a lot of money. Some of them are huge and have hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal. You can't tell them all, oh, you have to reach this really, really ideal goal. So they set a more practical MCL. Now, it's still a perfectly safe level in a general way of speaking. For example, with arsenic, you have an MCL of 10. And the nice thing about this kind of MCL is it makes it possible for utilities to reach compliance. It's actually possible for them to send drinking water in the pipes because they can reach that 10 ppb arsenic MCL. And over time, the understanding is that MCL is going to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and closer to 0. And one day we'll magically have perfect water. I think a lot of this is really confusing to people because they see the MCL and they're like, oh, well, the EPA is, purposefully making the water quality worse than it should be. No, they're dealing with the practical constraints that really do confront really hardworking people at utilities every day who have to somehow take water out of a reservoir or out of a deep well, treat it with chemicals to make sure it's free of bacteria, send it through the pipes and make sure it's safe enough for you to drink at home. Like I said, it's easier for some than it is for others. Some utilities do really struggle with even those MCL level goals. We've thought to ourselves, how are we going to engender trust when someone does a water test with us? When our report comes back, we want someone to look at it and sure, be able to see that MCLG and how your lead levels compare to that ideal, to see the MCL and see how your levels compare to that regulatory threshold. But then there was one more wrinkle. A lot of contaminants in drinking water, a lot of things in drinking water are not regulated. Plus, you have the fact that, well, the scientific community often disagrees and has different opinions about these contaminants. So it's never really black and white. And so even for arsenic, there are researchers who say like, oh, technically the MCLG should be 1, not 0 ppb, because there's some suggestion that possibly a little bit of it could be okay for you at some really trace level. Okay, so because there is some disagreement for a lot of these things, there is ambiguity. And when there's ambiguity, I don't think people make the best decisions. People want to see the information. And so we said with every water quality report we sell, you can see the MCL, you can see the MCLG and compare your results to that. But then we're going to do something called the Simple Lab Recommend, the SLR. This is our recommendation level. And the way we went about choosing the SLR for every contaminant was we chose the most stringent, scientifically peer-reviewed research suggesting what that ideal level would be for that contaminant. So that means looking at every state's research done by the state, not just the federal government, but by the state of California, state of New Jersey, state of Minnesota, compiling all of that research and saying, okay, if you were to be the most conservative in your decision about what is safe for each contaminant, what would that concentration be? And so the TAP score assesses against that. And so it's really difficult to get a high TAP score. And that's not because we're trying to scare everyone into avoiding their tap water. It's the contrary. We want you to see what is absolutely what we consider the best, and we want to help you get there. And the moral of the story is there's really often only one way to get to a 99 TAP score. It's a system from 1 to 99. And it's to test your water, understand what is wrong with it, even if it's a small, minor issue. Your score can be a 65 and the water is still perfectly safe to drink. If you want to improve it and optimize it, which filter do you need to buy? How do you want to treat that water? And so by setting the TAP score precedent of perfection, so to speak, at 99, it allows us to get everyone's water quality, where it is today and help you get it to that 99. And for most people, I think the average score is in like the mid 70s, upper 70s. It depends if you have a well or if you're a city water customer. It was a very long answer, but does that help?
No, that's perfect because, for example, we had one test that we did in Los Angeles, kind of in your neck of the woods, and I think it scored around a 45. And it had things like arsenic and lithium in the water. And when we shared the results, there were a couple of comments that said something to the effect of, well, that amount of lithium is not bad for you, or that amount of arsenic is okay. And for me personally, if I know that my water has those contaminants in it, I want to get rid of it. So it's powerful to understand what's in your water and then have the data to decide what to do with it. And understanding how the benchmark between the EPA and between TAP score, how you've designed it to essentially be best practice, is super helpful to understand. And there's one more thing that I just wanted to bring up that's on this topic, a resource that's related to it that is called the City Water Project. And it's a massive database where you can go and type in your zip code or your address and get information on your water provider or your water quality. And I think it's super helpful if you can't get a water test, or you just want to spot check or have a jumping off point of your local water quality. Do you want to just share a little bit about what the City Water Project is?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing it up. It's still something we've been developing only for about a year or so now. So it's an early on project, but it's coming a great distance very quickly. Every tap is different. And while it would be wonderful for everyone in every home to buy a water test and know their water quality at home, either maybe you can't afford it, or it's not practical for the current time, or maybe you're just trying to check and see what's happening recently. You've bought a test in the past and you're just kind of curious to see what the general area's water quality is like. Well, we took all of the state's compliance water quality data, brought for each state all that data into one unified platform, along with groundwater data and surface water data from USGS and several other sources. You can read about it on the City Water Project. We brought all of that it's publicly available data. So it is publicly available, but you need to file FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests to get that data. We compile it all on a regular basis. We combine it with anonymized data that we collect around the country. And we say, hey, here's the water quality data at every address nationwide, estimated. Here are the results near your home. And so maybe if you can't afford the test, or if the timing isn't right, or if you've already bought a test and just kind of checking in to see what's happening in your neck of the woods, you can go to gosimplelab.com/citywater and just search your town, see the water quality data there. It's a great step one. Frankly, it's a service that should be readily available publicly, in our opinion. So it's free. And what we hope it'll do is it'll help you kind of get over the hump of having no idea what's going on in the local water quality, and now at least having some idea. Whether you buy a test or not, we're not, being a science-first company, an objectivity-first company, we felt it was better to put this information forward, share it publicly, understand that, okay, some people might not buy tests now because they've they've seen the data, and they don't want to spend $100, $200, $500 on a water test. That's fine. We would honestly rather more people have more information. And those of you who do want to buy a test, who want to kind of see exactly the tap water in your home, you can still do that. So we make it freely available, and we think that that's its best use case for everyone.
And I've used it several times, and I like it because it's very user friendly, as opposed to if you go out and try to find this data in other publicly available sources or the EPA, it's a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So I'll put the link in the description below if you do want to go to it. It's kind of fun to just put your zip code in and see what's going on in your water. Now let's move on to our next topic, from tap water to bottled water, and the question of, is bottled water safe, and is bottled water better than our tap water? And it's perfect timing because I believe you guys just finished a massive study looking at 100 different kinds of bottled water and testing them. So maybe you can share just what you found in this study.
Yeah, this is super exciting because I mean we're actually personally curious to test all these bottled water brands. And if you've been to a gas station or a grocery store anytime in the last 30 years, you've just noticed more and more options on the shelf. And if anyone has benefited from the confusion around water quality and tap water and well water and filtration products, if anyone's benefited from the general confusion there, it's bottled water. Now, let me say a couple things. One, there's a great time and a place for bottled water. And it's, when you need the convenience of having a bottle of water with you right now and you don't have any other means, it's fantastic. If there's an emergency situation, it's fantastic. It's life-saving, in fact. The problem is when people are buying bottled water and drinking it at home because they don't trust their tap water, when in fact the tap water is as good as that bottled water, right? And so now you're just adding more plastic to the world and wasting money. So how do we better kind of govern the use of bottled water relative to what is often a perfectly good and environmentally more sustainable option, your tap water? Well, we need data on bottled water. People need to know what they're drinking. Like we do a lot of testing every day. And we speak to a lot of people every day about their tap water. And more than anything else, they're wondering, is this safe to drink? Should I just buy bottled water? Exactly. So that was kind of how this came to be. Like we got to know more about bottled water. And frankly, nobody really knows what's in bottled water. Some brands do post a kind of result for their occasional testing online, and power to them. That's super useful. In this country, you don't have to put, the bottled water chemistry or microbiology on the label. In Brazil, for example, you do. And some other countries, they require this. And so while there is some testing of bottled water under FDA, not under EPA, but under FDA, it's not nearly as transparent as I think we all want it to be. So we're going to start changing this, and we're going to start allowing people to compare their tap water to their favorite bottled water brands. So we're now, on an ongoing basis, and we started with 100 brands, continuing to test more and more bottles of water that people send in and say, hey, will you test this bottle of water? And we're trying to compile our own database of what bottled water actually contains. Who are which brands of bottled water are more reliable than others? Which brands of bottled water have kind of trace levels of certain contaminants that are in your tap? Which ones are purified and actually really, really pure, maybe even too pure? Like we've all heard the story, don't drink distilled water. It's got so little in it, it'll leach minerals from your bones. So there's a full spectrum there. But we felt like, listen, if we really want to engender the appropriate amount of trust in tap water and in purchasing the right filter for your home, we have to have a benchmark to compete against. And that's bottled water. We have to get people to compare the two things when they make these choices. So we started with these 100 brands, and we're testing. We've completed the testing now, and we're slowly releasing the results as we kind of analyze it and figure out what the most appropriate way to release them is. And we'll continue to test and release bottled water data with the hope of giving people a tangible comparison between tap water and bottled water. A little bit of this is something we've been noticing, which is kind of may be controversial. Bottled water is better than tap water most of the time. Raw, unfiltered tap water. Now, the difference is marginal. But technically speaking, when we run our statistics, bottled water does really well. So the goal is to be able to compare your tap water to your favorite bottled water brands and to see the differences. And we think that if you give someone that chore of comparing those two things, your tap water quality data and the bottled water quality data, you start to make smart choices. You start to say, oh, actually, look, in my community, in my house, my tap water is as good as most bottled water. Or you say, hey, my tap water isn't as good as the bottled water. How do I make it better? Okay, easy. You need to buy this filter or this filter. And you could run another test, or you could take our word for it, and your bottled water suddenly is as good as the tap water that you filtered at home. And so we think that decision-making power needs to be available to people without testing bottled water, without giving people those numbers on these various brands. It's really hard to say, is my bottled water better or my tap water better? And even if the health differences here are marginal, we all know that we kind of want the best for ourselves. And if there's some risk or some fear that you think your tap water isn't as good as bottled water and you have the money, well, maybe those people just keep buying bottled water for 60 years. And so we want to avoid that situation as best we can. We want to give people the confidence in their tap water to filter it appropriately, make it as good or better than the bottled water options they have at the store. And then they'll make the right decisions.
I was reading through the reports, and I think for me, it was kind of surprising because there were a number of brands that you saw that had contaminant levels of various contaminants that were out of line from the acceptable standards. And to me, that was kind of surprising. But then what was more surprising was, like you were saying, that is regulated by the FDA, not the EPA, like our tap water. And I think a lot of people, including myself, before I was reading this, was thinking that the oversight on bottled water was quite strict. But the reality is it's still strict, but it is not as strict as I thought. Like, for example, FDA approval for like pharmaceuticals or something, you're consuming bottled water, so you'd think it would be pretty stringent, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And I think secondly, that bottled water is not this silver bullet where you buy a bottled water and it's perfectly pure 100% of the time. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And like you mentioned, in some cases, your tap water could be a better choice than buying bottled water. And of course, at the end of the day, we all want to reduce our reliance on plastic anyway. And I will also put the link to this study because I think you just started to release the data like a week ago or a few days ago. And so it's really relevant and timely right now. But that leads us to a perfect segue into, okay, we have our tap water, we have bottled water, and what options we have for filtering our tap water. So what are your findings with looking for the best water treatment option for someone's home?
I mean, definitely, I think we're moving in a direction where everyone in the country will have, or most people in the country will have some form of at-home water filtration or treatment or purification. I think that just makes sense. I mean, we've got a number of weird forces at play. A lot of industrial contaminants that have people afraid, things like PFAS. We have a lot of things in the pipes that can't be very well dealt with at the treatment plant every time because they're in the private homes of people, like lead and copper. And then we also have new chemicals all the time. And we know that the regulatory framework is a little bit slow to kind of necessarily address the concerns that are in the news and in the media. The media has gotten faster at identifying these things. The regulations have stayed more or less the same speed. I don't like the way that looks. And then there's also the fact that people want the best for themselves and for their health. And you know, we all know that bottled water is out there marketing how good it is how safe and pure and healthy bottled water is, there's really no one marketing your tap water to you. The little marketing that does get done is done by treatment companies and filtration companies. But because there's been so much confusion in the marketplace, and frankly, for a long time, a lack of regulation, and this is cleaning up now, in my opinion, even the filtration companies for a long time were not making the information about water quality perfectly easy for a consumer to look at and then make a decision based upon. And so filtration is the magic bullet. Filtration, in my opinion, at home solves all of the problems of people being afraid of their tap water and having some distrust issues, gives them the power to make decisions, a cool, fun, engaging experience, maybe like an app or a product on the counter or something that like actually gets you kind of inspired or interested to have that trust in tap water. All of that can happen with an invigorated, consumer-friendly filtration sector. One where you have people buying and selling, buying choices they really like for their home. Maybe it fits under the sink, or it goes in the counter, or it goes in the refrigerator, or in the garage. There's a bunch of different options. And the way you get people to trust their tap water and make the right decision, in my opinion, that's most sensible, knowing what we know about American consumerism and about the actual risks in tap water and the capabilities of filtration, is to make that customer experience enjoyable. To give people the confidence they need to buy the right filter when they have a water quality report in front of them or the water quality data in front of them. Buy the right filter, trust that it works, and buy less bottled water. Or buy less, even more importantly, instead of, there's one thing bottled water does do well that I didn't mention earlier, is it's better than a sugary beverage, right? So on the totem pole, you've got sugary beverage, less sugary beverage, bottled water, tap water. And I want to get tap water at least up to where bottled water is, right? It's the best way to do that is to give people the right filters. The best way to give people the right filters is, hey, what is your water quality now? Which technology do you need to improve it? Do you need a reverse osmosis system? Do you need a carbon filter? Do you need a catalytic carbon filter? Do we need to address aesthetic concerns, heavy metals, organics? Give people the information they need to choose the right filter. They'll buy the right filter, and their tap water will be as good or better than bottled water.
I have one follow-up with that. You did a really great job of outlining the different types of filters, what makes sense, reverse osmosis, carbon, et cetera, for different points after you get your test or know what's in your water, which one will treat what. But how do you know which specific, say it's after you get the test, it says, okay, a reverse osmosis system is an ideal fit for this. How do you go about finding the right filter? Because I think the same way people have a distrust in whether it's their water supplier or the tap water or bottled water, I think people are having a same kind of psyche with water filters and with what claims water filtration companies are making. Are they legit? Can it deliver? What sort of certifications do they have, whether it's NSF certification? Because what you see is the same kind of smoke and mirrors where there is, this is NSF certified versus this is tested to NSF standards, or the components of this are NSF certified. So there's a lot of song and dance around what's good, what isn't. How kind of walk through how you would think of finding the right filter, knowing that there's just so much marketing muscle behind a lot of these filter businesses.
As you know, there's a limited number of filtration technologies out there. Let's call it 20, right? And most of them are 5 or 6. Good news is there's a lot of research on the kind of technical feasibility of each of those technologies. How good is carbon at removing organics versus removing PFAS versus removing lead? And research has been done on this for most of these filtration technologies. But if you don't know the water quality, you can't really pick the right product. You can guess. And it is this problem that I think stymied the industry from having the trust it wants today. Because what happened is a lot of filter manufacturers, a lot of companies just said, "Oh yeah, this filter removes everything," or they would get a certification for, let's say, chlorine removal, and their big branded NSF certified logo on the box. It says, in very, very small print, or maybe if you go to the link, certified to reduce chlorine, right? But then somehow you're left with the impression that this filter reduces everything. 100% reduction of everything, perfectly clean water. That practice went on for a while. And while not every filtration company fell into that trap, a lot did. And I think there was, as a result of that, this loss of trust in the home filtration sector, a lot of confusion for sure. Now, some companies picked up really quickly and got on top of things, and they get all of the WQA and NSF and IATMO certifications for their components and their filtration media and their claims of removal ability. Some of them do that. Now, it is expensive to do. And for what it's worth, that's still only one step in a way. That's still only like a certification agency testing something in a lab. It's the best we've got. It's a really important thing to be doing, but you might still wonder, well, how does it work in my house? And so there's still some need, in our opinion, even with excellent certification and excellent compliance by the filtration companies and getting their product certified. And more and more of them are doing this now. There's still need to have the ability to test to see if the filter is really working. So, with every one of our TAPSCOR reports, you get a recommendation that says, hey, given what we found at the levels we found it at and the combination of things we found, these are the technologies we prioritize in any product you buy. Make sure it has an activated carbon filter, or make sure you have ion exchange or a KDF media. And in time, what we think that will do is ensure that more and more people who have water quality reports in hand will buy the right product, have reliable water quality, and make smart decisions. And that's really what we're trying to do, is really inform, shed light on all of that darkness that was for a long time confusing for people, and say, listen, no, you can make the right decisions based upon logical information. You just need to test your water and compare it to the literature as we do to choose the right product.
There you go. Well, this was an excellent discussion. I really appreciate you taking the time. We covered a lot of ground, from tap water to bottled water to testing your water to filtering your water, and that's a lot of information for people to have. So I thank you for that, for taking your time to share your insight. And what is I'm sure that people may have questions with all of this information. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you or the TAPSCOR team?
Website, mytapscore.com, live support staff there all the time, every day. Not every day. They do sleep. If you leave a message there on the live chat, you'll always be responded to. And we're not the kind of company that only answers questions if you're a customer. You can ask us anything, and the team is very well educated in water quality and in toxicology and in filtration technology, and we can provide help as best we can, no matter what.